But if I have somebody writing for our speaker as well, there is no CE credit for this class. It is strictly informational, but we're so glad to have Mr. Kurt, say your last name? Bednar, awesome, with the city of Brentwood here. So welcome. We're going to get started. Mr. West here is going to kind of feed questions, and I think if we have time at the end, we could just have a Q&A. But if not, then we're just going to roll with it. But if you want to maybe say a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Sure.
We'd love to hear about you. Yeah.
Everybody can hear me online. That's a pretty big microphone you got.
Yeah. We're going to let you hold it next time.
Like the old radio ones or whatever. But yeah, I'm Kirk Badnar. I'm city manager in Brentwood. I have been city manager for a little over 8 years, about 8.5 years. Have been with the city a little over 20 years, almost 21 years. So I was the assistant city manager prior to that. So a lot of people say, what the heck is a city manager, which is usually the question. So my job is I'm appointed by the elected officials, the city commissioners. I'm the only employee they appoint. And then my job is kind of like the CEO of a company. I administer the day-to-day business of the city. So all the other employees, department heads, police chief, fire chief, all them kind of report to me. I'm responsible to the board. So I'm the day-to-day manager of the city. So it is what the title says. So but anyway, I always enjoy meeting with the realtors. I have over the last several years met with the parks folks. Cindy Stanton over there has had me in several times. Always good questions. Maybe you don't like some of my answers, but it is what it is. So I'll at least be honest and answer anything I can, and I'll let Wes go from there.
How did you end up in Brentwood?
How did I end up in Brentwood? So I grew up in, we were just talking here for offline. I grew up in Illinois. Went to college up there, went to graduate school at Indiana University, and then out of Indiana went to Texas, city of Fort Worth, Texas for 6 years. Texas is nice. It feels like a little bit like Texas out here right now weather-wise, but I was looking to get back towards home. My wife's from Illinois also, so we actually took a job with the University of Tennessee here back in 1995. They have an agency as part of their Institute of Public Service that provides technical and consulting assistance to city governments. A lot of cities in Tennessee are very small, don't have professional staff. So did that for 5 years. As part of that, got to know Mike Walker, my predecessor in Brentwood, if anybody was around Mike's time, pretty well. And so when an assistant position opened up in 2000, Mike asked if I was interested, and I said I was. So he hired me, and I've been here ever since. If you're going to do what I do in city management, Brentwood's a pretty good place to do it.
Yeah, Mike was here for what, 27 years?
Mike was here for 23 years, yeah. It's funny, he's still in town. He lived on the west side, then he moved to the east side, out in Concord Crossing, and he still calls to complain about stuff. And I said, Mike, it was that way when you were here. You just never went to the east side of town to notice it. So.
How do you spell your last name?
Bednar.
What do you like most about Brentwood and Williamson County?
Well, I mean, it's a great quality of life, let's face it. I mean, I've got 3 kids, range from 28 to 16. So just the quality of life, the people here too. But let's face it, it's also changing. Nashville's changing and the growth. And we try to do what we can, but as you all know, in the business you're in, people have property rights and the ability to do with their property. As much as people think we have the ability to just say no, we really don't. So, but I love, I mean, when I came here, again, when we moved here in 1995, the thought was, 5 or 6 years in my job, a lot of people move around all over. And so we figured we'd be here a little while because we had no family here and connections. And, but obviously we stayed and love it. And my wife would never want to leave. But again, schools, obviously, if you got kids, and just quality of life and recreational amenities, the ability to be in a safe, you would say small town, but we're not a small town. But a safe suburban community and have all the amenities of Nashville and the sports and the social and the restaurants and all that within a short drive. And most days a short drive. So.
Okay. Are there any new subdivisions slated for 2021 or 22?
Yeah, there's actually a fair number. So you've still got some of the established ones that still have lots left. I mean, Witherspoon is opening up their last 2 sections. Tradition still have a fair number of lots. Owen has a few. But there's several that have been approved. And some of them are internal, or have been in the city, but we've actually annexed some property here in the last several months. So they're not, I mean, they're still virgin land today, but they're in the midst of getting ready to develop. I would say the biggest one is and I got my little cheat sheet here just so I remember, because the names these days that they come up with is amazing. Rosebrook. Rosebrook is out on Sunset Road. It's a CPS land, I think probably with Ford, partnering the same group that did Witherspoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's across from Woodlands at Copperstone, Brookfield area there. It's what we call the golf property. It's 100 and some acres. So that is 124 lots. Estate type, Witherspoon type homes probably, but I think there's actually a variety of sizes lots and a variety of sizes. So they hope to, they've got all plan approvals. I think they hope to break ground here shortly in the next few months. They're shooting for trying to be a Parade of Homes community in fall of 22. The other big one is out on Old Smyrna Road. It's not big, but it's big news. The Mick property, if you're familiar with that property, with that big gorgeous home on the north side of Old Smyrna Road. Brandon Jenkins and his group have got that. I think that's 22 or so lots. They'll all be 2 acres or more. Then there's the Prim property right on Moore's Lane there. As you're heading out towards Wilson Pike, they've begun land development on it.
Mm-hmm.
The historic home, if anybody was following that, was potentially going to be demolished, and that's now been saved by a couple who have bought that and plan to renovate it and put it on the market. They don't plan to live in it. But the Prim property there behind there, I think it's 22, 23 lots or so that they've started development on there.
Who's that developer? Is it Randy Arnold?
Randy Arnold actually he bought the remaining parcels, including the historic home. So he's got, I think, 3 5-acre tracts, one of which is the historic home. So there's another couple 5-acre tracts on the remaining one. But Gerald Pedigo from Rutherford County is the developer there. Now, I don't know if Randy maybe is in with the building part of it. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay.
But I know Randy has a couple large estate lots there on the remaining part.
Sorry to get a little off subject, so we can get right back on that subject. But the most important question is going to be asked this morning is, are we going to have any amphitheater shows at Crockett Park this summer?
Yeah, we had one, not last week, but the week before. We got one this coming up. And we'll have our normal, regular
I need the schedule.
5,000 or 7,000 people 4th of July event too.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so we are doing that.
Quick question. What was the name of the Rose neighborhood?
It is Rosebrook
Rosebrook.
is what they're calling it.
What's the price range of those?
Oh. I don't know. I wouldn't even hazard a guess these days what the price range would be. I mean, I don't know if is there a new home built in Brentwood that's under $1 million these days? I don't know that there is.
Not that I know of.
So Prim Harlan subdivision is the one on Old Smyrna. That's Brandon Jenkins and his group. Harlan, yeah. Then you've got, we're seeing a lot of these small little 7, 8, 10 acre tracts that are little cul-de-sacs that have become 4, 5, 6 lots. You got a couple of those out on Concord. You got Delfino, the old Dolphin Club, for those of you who've been around Brentwood a while. They're at corner of Old Smyrna and Wilson Pike. That's Mr. Spangler. That's, I think, 5 lots.
Why was the tennis thing next for that site?
It became we didn't mix it. It was an economic thing. However, they couldn't make it work.
Okay. All the tennis players were so excited about that.
And that was,
now we're all disappointed.
It was zoned, it was ready, it had an approved plan and everything else, but it didn't.
Well, with Maryland Farms,
with the Y closing
away, we're gonna have an acute shortage of courts.
And then the other new one that's probably the closest to having lots ready would be the Allen property out on Split Log Road, across from Terramore, next to, I get them all, Glen Abbey. They're the farthest along, I think, in terms of new development subdivisions. I'm sorry, you had a question about
Kurt, have the Crockett's come to you with any requests yet?
for the property there on Wilson Pike that was cleared just south of Church Street. And hopefully people online can hear. The question was whether the Crockett family that owns a large, I think it's 20 plus acres. We had a developer that came to us who was interested in the property. And this was probably a year or so ago, who just had some preliminary discussions about ideas of what they would do with it. Nothing has come up since then.
Is Lola Mae Crockett still alive?
I don't know.
Probably not.
But there's a Crockett that I think was living on the property. So when it got cleared, everybody figured, and the adjacent neighbors to the south was worried about commercial, and it's zoned residential, and I don't see it being rezoned to commercial. So there's a little bit of talk, but nothing like firm has ever been submitted for an application or anything.
It was kind of odd to just clear cut it like that.
Yeah. Actually looks a little better, to be honest with you, but it gave the impression that there's a lot, that there's something coming. You've got the little subdivision, similar to like we were talking about, these little 7-8 lot ones on Wilson Pike across from the recycling center and the fire station. It's we call it the Lawson property. I think they're calling it Broad Oaks. That's a Partners in Building one there. CPS Land was involved in that also.
Yeah.
And then I'd say you still got lots. There's a few lots in Oman. The Marshall Place subdivision, another little gated community on between Wilson Pike and the interstate there, just south of the Dolphin Club. Tradition still has lots, and then of course Reserve at Raintree still has several sections still to be built that haven't even begun yet down there.
Most critical lots.
Yeah, a lot on the slope. Yeah, there's not much flat land left till we start getting into the Crockett one would be fairly flat. And Prim would be fairly flat, and several of those are. And then, the Turner property, if and when anything ever happens there.
Who's the other developer in the Prim property besides Randy?
Gerald Pedigo.
Pedigo?
And I don't know that he's a builder. I think he's just a land developer. And he's out of Rutherford County.
Where's the Crockett property?
It is just south of Church Street on Wilson Pike.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were thinking Crockett Road.
No, not Crockett Road there.
Yeah.
So those are the main ones, and there's a lot of growing interest. Again, we hadn't annexed land, bad English, we haven't annexed land in a long time. But some of the area out there, Split Log Road, Waller Road, Sunset Road, that area there is seeing renewed interest. It's got utilities from other providers than us. So in our view, if it potentially could develop anyway in the county, we'd rather it develop in the city in terms of they're going to use our services and impact fees and those kind of things. So, we don't actively try to promote development. I mean, we're a little bit different in that way. So if we control utilities, that allows us a little bit more say and yes or no. So we've got some other areas out on Split Log where we are the utility provider, and if they want to be annexed for development purposes, we may say no. But in those other areas, it's Metro Sewer, it's Nolensville Water, so they can develop without our utilities, and in that case, it's likely to happen. And so we'll probably more willing to annex in those cases and bring it under our development standards.
How about down Pleasant Hill, like back into Sonoma and those areas?
Same issue there. Yeah, there's a little bit of interest there. Same issue is lack of sewer right now. And that's our sewer area. But to get it there is a long way to come. So there's got to be, one, we've got to agree to do it. And two, you've got to have enough financially, enough lots to make sense in extending that sewer all the way down there. So.
Kurt, there's been a lot of concern about with the growth that the sewer system cannot handle more. What are we doing to counter that? Or what are we doing to help strengthen that sewer system?
Yeah, so the sewer system issue, and it has been a big thing. It's not a basic capacity of true sewage. The issue is when it rains and there's rainwater, it's the leakiness of the sewer system. So we have plenty of capacity if it was just homes and businesses and true sewage. It's the water when we have the rain issues, which that's not unique. That's the same in every community. So, one thing we're doing is the system was designed and is modeled based upon 1 unit in acre density. So maintaining that, and the commissioners are stringent on that. Today, it used to be if you had an OSRD, which is a smaller lots open space, generally you can lay that out and get more lots than you could if you had true 1 acre lots. And so in the past, we never really worried about if someone went to an OSRD zoning, if they were getting more lots than they could under the existing zoning. Today we do. So even if you go to OSRD zoning, the first question we're going to ask a developer is, how many lots could you get under the existing zoning? And we're going to kind of keep you to that same number. You might be able to creatively design it a little better, but lot number. So trying to limit development. And we continue to do sewer rehab in terms of lining manholes and pipes and those kind of things. But long term, we're buying land here shortly. Hopefully this week we'll have a contract signed. All behind CPA, Christ Presbyterian, there where our main sewer plant or our sewer connection point is to Metro, for a storage tank. So when you have those surges in the wet weather, you've got somewhere for that excess sewage to go instead of just spilling out of manholes. So that's the next big step. And again, your technical stuff that realtors don't care about, but we don't have a sewer plant. All of our sewage is shipped to Nashville for treatment. So we have a connection point out there behind CPA Academy that's got a physical limitation to it. And that's kind of our restrictor in terms of what we can do. So that's why we built a storage tank there. And to get additional capacity from Metro would be highly expensive. We could never recover it with the amount of development we would likely allow before we build out. And you have to upgrade sewer lines all the way through Chickering Road and Belmead. And so nobody really wants to take that on. So we got to manage what we've got, but we've got to build storage for those surge events in the wet weather.
Because we've had water issues on the west side, water contamination issues.
Yeah, when you have overflows, most of your manholes are along the river. So yeah, so you have overflows, and I don't want to say that luckily, but generally speaking, when that happens, it's high flow areas in the river, and so it's very diluted at that point in time. But yeah.
What's the difference between the OSRD and an older traditional PUD?
So an OSRD, which is open space residential district for our zoning, the traditional zoning in Brentwood is a minimum 1 acre lot. In the flat lands, it's cookie cutter, square lots otherwise, but a minimum, the lot has to be 1 acre in size or more. In an OSRD, they can go down to, I think, under a ½ acre, but somewhere in that development, you've got an equivalent amount of open space that is permanent open space that when you add it all together with the lots, you get back to that 1 unit an acre density.
You get approximately to that 1 acre.
Yeah, for the overall development. Individual lots are less than an acre, but with the dedicated open space that is maintained by the homeowners, you get to a 1 unit an acre or greater.
So it's similar to a PUD, it's just.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we don't have true PUDs in our zoning.
Okay.
But an OSRD would be the closest
version
to it.
of a PUD.
It would be the closest to it, because when the property is rezoned, that development plan actually is tied to that ordinance. So it is an adopted plan.
Which works well when you've got some low level drainage area.
Yeah, you got floodplain, or you've got
Yeah.
TBA towers or whatever through it. You can get a little bit of credit for that.
Or a big giant hill.
Right. Stay off the bad areas and build in the better
Yeah.
areas with lower, but still maintain the overall density.
Are there any changes realtors should be aware of for clients looking to build on vacant lots or homes where they are going to tear down the house and rebuild?
Yeah, the tear down rebuild thing is really becoming, well, it has for the last few years, but, the Meadow Lakes, Carondelays, Brent Havens, River Oaks, yeah, a little less, but it's starting. I would say for the last few years, the adjoining neighbors have been quiet. That is ending right now. The neighbors are starting to get frustrated. And a lot of the frustration boiled over in March when we had the rain event and the flood, because we had a couple areas in Meadow Lake where, in their minds, the additional impervious area or the raising of the grade from to the lot to the side of them was the cause of some flooding in those areas. So even before the flood, one thing we did starting back in July is any of those lots, it used to be, if it had a house in it before, you tear it down and you build a house, and the building codes people would inspect the house and that would be it. But given the great increase in impervious area and the fact that some folks were kind of building up, trying to get a little bit of a basement or whatever, it does affect drainage. So now any tear down rebuild lot will have to have an engineered site plan showing the drainage plan and everything else.
When did that take effect?
July 1 of 2020. So any permits issued after that.
Does that fall under Mike DeMobrian?
No, it
Who's
falls
that
under
from?
our engineering department. Lori Lang is our new department.
Lang?
Lori Lang, she's our new engineering director. So that's a new requirement. So, but that still doesn't address issues of the quantity of stormwater that might be coming off or the quality of it. Metro addresses both, and we may look at it. Again, all those, it's hard for the people in those neighborhoods who, have the 70s ranches or whatever to think that I mean, all those homes are being built, the new ones, you know, within the established building envelope. So they're not like building outside of areas that otherwise would have been available to them. But it's just so different in those neighborhoods. So,
So now a site plan with an engineer approval stamp is required?
yeah. And it'll have to reflect, again, drainage contours, all that kind of stuff. I mean, drainage is the main thing, is the concern. So far, you hear a little bit of grumbling about out of character, you know, that kind of stuff in terms of just the look of the homes. But I think most people in Brentwood understand property rights and that kind of stuff. So the grumbling really has been just more on the drainage impacts of those larger homes and whether we're doing enough to try to mitigate that. So we've stepped it up a little bit, and we may step it up a little more going forward.
Any idea what an engineer site plan run goes for these days?
Probably a few $1,000s.
If you can get them.
Yeah, that's the problem too. I mean, surveyors, site, you know, engineers and that kind of stuff. The other thing is it's a little bit, I'll go along if you let me ramble here a bit, is fences and pools and all this kind of stuff that people, and additions that people want to do. And they, you know, I think y'all understand, if you look at a plat of a lot, there's a building envelope that's defined by the setbacks, side, front, whatever. And you got to build your house. Pool's got to be within that setback. Any outdoor living areas that are anything above grade. So an at-grade patio doesn't, but anything outdoors, a fireplace, you know, seating areas, those kind of stuff that have structures, all have to be within the building envelope. And we're getting more and more, whether it's the rebuilds or new builds really, where they're maxing out that building envelope primarily with the structure of the house. And then they get in there and buy it. And then they come in, you know, 6 months later and say, I want to put in a pool. And we're like, you got no room.
Yeah.
You've maxed out your envelope with just the structure of the house.
Can pool decking be on the setback?
No.
Just.
And that grade deck around it, but anything elevated has to be within the building envelope. So, and that's worse on the OSRD lots, which by themselves are already small.
Absolutely.
And then they maximize that, and then there's, so that's a challenge for us. The bigger lots, the rebuilds, they've got a lot of space. If they plan accordingly, you can still probably fit all that in, but more and more people who, you know, want an outdoor living area and just, so you got 2 feet from your back door to the back of your building envelope, and that's it. And they're very frustrated.
If anybody needs a surveyor or a soil scientist, you can forget about it. I don't even know how many surveyors I've talked to. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
They're
that's a
booked out
challenge.
6 months. You can't hire them.
And then the other, I mentioned fences, those are the other thing, and that's more maybe existing homes is, if you also look on a plat, so you got the building envelope, but then along the lot lines, you're going to see public utility and drainage easements that we are pretty protective of. So people always want to put a fence all the way out to their property line. Well, we want to allow fences in the utility easement.
Right.
Now, if it's a 10-foot easement and there's no active utilities in there, we may allow a little bit of an encroachment, but most of them are going to have, especially on a side lot, a swale that's intended to carry that water out to the street or back to whatever. And so we won't allow fences in swales. Now, maybe at the very top of the bank, we'll try to work with people as much as we can, but that's another frustration. Is that people think, okay, I'm going to buy this house, I'm going to put the pool there, I'm going to put my fence there, I'm going to plant landscaping in an easement, which we won't allow either. So then we become the bad guys. So my plea to y'all would be is if people look at their plat, make sure they understand what it is on that piece of paper and what those lines mean and what those limitations are.
Are there any plans for multifamily housing?
No. You know, again, how many of you have been around a while, but Tapestry was the one there up on Centerview that was approved under the town center zoning and all that. And that the availability of that has been taken out of the zoning code. So there's no real, other than a senior living center type of thing, which is age restricted, you know, we have those, and those are all in commercial zoning. But residential zoning, no, there's no multifamily allowance in our zoning code today.
Okay. Are you getting any pressure or being pressed for affordable housing?
No, I mean, and that sounds terrible to say, to be quite honest with you, but I think that ship sailed. Because, I mean, the only way you're going to get, and what's the definition of affordable, I guess, I don't know what that is. But the only way you get that is with density, and that's just not something we're going to do. You know, we looked at gosh, probably been 4 or 5 years now, trying to do something for senior, age-restricted senior housing where, and not just, the Heritage has its niche, but it's a different financial model than some people want. Some people want to still own a piece of dirt and that kind of stuff.
Like a
So
Delaware.
huh?
Like a Delaware.
Yeah, exactly. So the Heritage, doesn't work. And so there's obviously some places in Franklin or Delaware and down Spring Hill and all that. But we looked at it. Okay, is there some way under our zoning that with an age restriction and a greater density that you could get something, garden homes where someone could actually physically own a home? And we looked at 4 or 5 years ago. The most some of our commissioners were willing to go was maybe 4 units an acre. And again, this is 4 or 5 years ago. And the developers at that time said, well, the expectation of something like that in Brentwood and the finishes, and I mean, you're still talking,
Right.
and then $500,000-$600,000 units, not the sell my Meadow Lake home and move down, buy something for 300 and have money in the bank. You weren't going to get to the product that a lot of people thought you were looking for. And then ultimately, there wasn't enough of our commissioners who were even willing to go above the 1 unit an acre density. So it died there. But senior would have been the only way I think you might have found something. But with today's market, I don't think it's feasible in any way.
Yeah, you'd have to.
Without a great density. And then density gets back to sewer issues, to be quite honest with you.
Any plans on alleviating some of the traffic conditions in Brentwood?
Well, the pandemic did it for us. That's the only pro-COVID comment I will have. And I'll be honest with you, y'all laugh, but my greatest fear is all these people that you all know that have moved here in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
When traffic gets back to what all of us know as normal, I can only imagine what they're going to think. What have you done? What has happened? Why, and we're all going to say, well, that's still better than it used to be. So.
Well, with that being said, what can you share with us about the occupancy in the commercial spaces in Maryland Farms? Because I drive through Maryland Farms every day.
Still a lot of empty
and
parking lots.
It's significantly different and it's not looking like it's recovering. And I see a lot of release signs.
Yeah, and so that's the issue is occupancy versus leased. I mean, most of the space is still leased. So from a vacancy rate, I still think we're in the 8, 9, 10% range, which isn't, bad compared to a lot of other areas. But how much of it is actually occupied is a different story, and how much of it will come back. Our office, City Hall, is in the Maryland Farm, so I always judge it, by looking at my window at 5 o'clock. And so
11:30 or 12 o'clock.
during the day, it's picking back up, and a few of the people I've talked to have, talked about getting more people back in starting in July or August. But I think long term that'll be the issue. Now we've mentioned the Y, Maryland Farms Y selling to Highwoods, which is, their plan. We don't know what their plan is, but it'll be something office related. So now again, the Y won't even close till the end of 2022, and then by the time they build, so they're still 3 or 4 years out from having space. But that was the first question we asked. I said, are you confident enough to buy this, spend what you're going to spend on this piece of property for office space, new office space in this office park? And they're one of the biggest office people in the country. So you figure they know the market, and they said that by the time we have product available, we're confident things will be back.
Right.
So no concern that we'll get a downgrade on our commercial rating.
Well, that is the long-term concern is the viability of that park in terms of property assessments and values. Now, of course, we just had appraisals come out, so it'll be interesting to see if any of that commercial property starts appealing those appraisals and what the long-term impact of that is. Prior to COVID, we had Boyle, was redeveloping Maryland Farms 1 and 2, rehabbing some buildings. So that was always my concern is whether or not the building owners would rehab and keep them up, or would they just kind of let them, go to B and then eventually to C. And pre-COVID, people were investing in them. Whether that comes back, hopefully they will.
I do some commercial, and most of what I see is right here in Cool Springs. And I haven't seen a little bit of a downturn, a little bit of vacancy, but not as much as you think.
The Maryland
No.
Farms buildings are so much older, a lot of them are so much older
Yeah,
than what we have here in Cool Springs, and I know that has been a conversation during city commission elections about the concern of it being, possibly being downgraded. The numbers were not supporting it, but it's been a conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a conversation and it's a concern. Yet you still got new. I mean, the Virginia Springs building, one is occupied Vaco and Core Civic is in there. The other one that just finished, I think, is fairly empty. Even Tractor Supply, their beautiful building, they don't have many people working in there yet. And how many do they bring back? Which has a ripple effect then for hotels and restaurants in that area, which are still struggling.
the thing that I've been seeing is the expansions, have kind of stopped, like the ones that were gonna, the companies that had 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, they were gonna, get more office space. Well, they stopped.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna get more office space. And then some of the other guys have basically decided they're gonna do this 50-50 thing. They're gonna have team blue and team red, or team A and B, and they're gonna have team A in the office this week, and then they're gonna have team B in the office next week. And so the other team works from home. So that'll just prevent expansion. It won't really cause much contraction. Seems to be weathered the storm.
Yeah, and I think the other part is the same companies may be in a building, but they may have 80% of the space or 75% of the space they had before and that kind of stuff. So that's the one big shakeout I think you still got to see is the office environment. I don't know that I believe everybody who's been working from home, because I think some people just don't want to do that, or it's a part-time thing, so they still got to have space for them. Even with the city, I mean, we had people working from home during COVID. And most of them are back, but some will still work 1 or 2 days a week from home or project-based type of work. So I think it'll be a little bit of things.
Any more conversation about the Calturner Farm area?
There hasn't been. He looked at it a few years ago. I had some people looking at it, because I think Cal's back living on the property from what I understand. His wife passed away, fairly recently. He had the big house over in Fieldstone Farms and all that, but I think he's back on the farm. He really has a love for the property. When I've met with him, his ultimate goal is he'd like to know what's going to happen with it while he still has some say in the decision making. But some of that property is in a trust, so when he passes, the trustees have some obligations with that property. But really, no, there hasn't been. I mean, it's zoned the Brentwood residential zoning. I'd be hard pressed politically today to see how that gets zoned any commercial. There's been talk about a long time ago, taking Murray Lane, extending it across, new interstate interchange, and just opening that all up. Well, I just politically, I don't see how that's there today. Sewer wise, they'd have to provide some provision on their own property to deal with sewer issues, or provide space for additional tanks or whatever the case would be. So. I often, to people who do development, often talk about really utilities drive a lot of the decision making in this area. Is the availability of water and sewer. And in our case, it's primarily sewer. Water, we don't have a water plant either. So we buy all of our water and ship all of our sewage. And so all of our planning kind of revolves around that capacity.
Any incentives for new businesses coming to Brentwood?
No, other beyond what the state provides. Tractor Supply is the only company that ever got a tax abatement that the city participated in. It was handled through Williamson County, but we agreed to abate a portion of our taxes, not all of it. I think it was $35,000 a year or something like that. So we abated the part that wasn't public safety related and those kind of things. So that's the only time, and that was a split vote in our commission at the time. So since then, there's never been a request for anything, because for us to do it, it would have to be a major employer that was actually going to own the property. Sometimes, I think even down here, if it's somebody who's leasing property for 10 or 15 years, they'll do it. I don't think we would ever consider just a lease type of improvement. So Tractor Supply was unique because they'll own the property once the tax abatement goes away and the Industrial Development Board deeds it over to them. So that was unique. So no, there's never been a discussion since then. And I don't know, I mean, again, post-COVID, I mean, because the idea there is you got people coming in, you got whatever 1,500 people they were going to have there and shopping and spending and all the residual effects of that. Do you even have that arrangement post-COVID? But I don't see us doing that. This really sounds bad to say, but I think a lot of the philosophy is at this point is we don't need to do that to attract people. Now, if Maryland Farms is half empty in 10 years and that kind of stuff goes on, maybe. But at this point in time, I think we feel like we're still attractive enough that people should want to be here. Now, again, the state has a lot of programs, much more than we could ever do anyway. And really, when it comes to tax abatement, our tax rate, city tax rate, is so low that it wouldn't be a deciding factor. So the county might do it and we might not participate, to be honest with you, because their tax rate is so much more. But on top of that would be the state incentives that might happen that we would not be participants in.
Okay.
The city or the county made a large land purchase, I believe, down Split Lock Road for schools. Have they started construction on that yet?
Well, we made a purchase for parks.
For parks?
Yeah,
I thought it was for the schools.
No, 52 acres right there just south of Annandale. Split Log, or I'm sorry, Old Smyrna, where it kind of makes a jog. It's the
Sensing property.
Sensing property, right? Windy Hill.
When are they going to start that?
So we bought 52 acres. They retained 38 acres. It was about 90 acres total. And the Sensings still live in the home there, so they kept that. You know, we already have 2 homes that we operate in our parks. We didn't need a third historic home to deal with. So, but they put it in a land trust, so it can never be developed and subdivided. That was part of our deal. So we bought 52, and as part of that deal, we're able to ensure preservation of all 90 acres in terms of not being developed for a subdivision. So that is, again, just south of Annandale.
It's right next to Carondelet.
Right next to Carondelet, and at the end of Jones Parkway in Brentwood there. So we've got money in next year's budget to start master planning that spring of 22.
But not breaking ground for a while.
Probably break ground maybe late 22, early 23.
Oh, okay. I've heard wildly different rumors on the time period. Anywhere from they're starting tomorrow to, no, it's going to be like 12 years.
Well, originally we had the idea was let's buy it and we don't have to do anything with it for a while.
Right.
So we had the police headquarters we were finishing up. We've got another fire station.
And that's finished.
We're getting ready. So
Police.
police headquarters is, yeah. The fire station will start this fall.
They moved in.
Yeah. They moved in really through the first half of May or so. So they're in there. So originally it was pushed out about 5 years or so. You know, financially for the city, COVID really didn't have the negative impact we thought it would. So we had some additional funds, capital monies. So we moved up the start of the park by about a year and a half or so.
Question in the chat real quick. Actually, I think now we have 2, but oh wow. Hey, Paul, are these 2 different? Oh no, you only asked 1. Sorry. What is the plan for Hill Center, Old Murray property to be completed?
So they are pretty much completed. The hotel will open probably sometime in the next 3 or 4 months. So they really only have 1 other parcel left that was approved for development, which is currently a parking lot next to the parking garage, between the parking garage and where the hotel is.
The flat surface parking lot?
Yeah. Not the new stuff, but that was built originally next to the garage where they were doing the valet parking, all the valet parking is. That's technically a development lot. I don't know if they're ever developed that, to be quite honest with you, because with the new area, that's where the shopping center, the donut place, the burger place and all that, there's like a 2-story parking garage behind that. In their original plans, that was going to be a 4-story garage, and they just decided not to build that. So I don't know if there's enough parking and demand there to develop the one other lot, but otherwise, it's pretty well, it'll be done here with the hotel being developed.
Okay, 1 more question. It's a little lengthy. What next steps do you recommend through the city of Brentwood when a community plat specifies the upkeep and maintenance of an easement? A city of Brentwood senior planner says is a tree preservation easement established 26 years ago is the responsibility of an HOA, and that HOA board continually says it does not maintain the easement. Homeowners have now removed sections of the trees and mature hedges in the easement and placed fencing in the easement, violating CCRs and plat restrictions. After a year and a half of communications with this HOA board, this HOA is thus far taking no action to enforce the CCR violations and restrictions of the plat provided by the city of Brentwood. Who should we contact within the city for the next steps to protect, restore, and ensure the proper easement maintenance moving forward?
Yeah, I think our folks are involved. I know exactly where that situation is.
Oh, fantastic. hopefully I read that okay.
No, you're right, you explained it pretty well. That person either lives in one of the two or represents people that do. But it's, I mean, our planning director, Jeff Dobson, I know is involved. Kristen Korn, our attorney, have been involved.
Okay.
It's a thorny subject, and the fact that I think they referenced 26 years ago, that complicates it, because
Sure.
obviously none of the same people are around. It's somewhat of a civil matter, but that's not to say that we won't get drawn into it at some point in time. So I probably should not say much more than that.
Okay, fantastic. That sounds like a
But
very
I know there's
specific
conversations
question.
going on
Okay.
with our staff, so I think the right people are involved.
Awesome, great. That sounds very specific.
And that is, but just in general, that comment I think brings up another thing for people to realize, that in most of our neighborhoods, especially in the OSRD ones, but really almost anyone now, there is an HOA, and that HOA has some legal responsibilities
Sure.
and legal obligations, whether it's just maintaining the property. But there are sometimes things that are on those plats that a developer will agree to, about tree preservation areas or hillside areas that won't be disturbed and all that. And then people move in and they back up to those areas, and, you know, their yards just kind of start creeping in there. So, you know, you all have a lot of warnings, I know, for people to understand, but that's another thing for new residents to understand, that when they buy into an HOA neighborhood, there are legal obligations that HOA is to uphold, and they're subject to being challenged and sued on that, or enforced by us. And we don't do that very often. But tree preservation is a big deal, and those are things that are agreed to lots of times up front by a developer who, once they're gone, those, I mean, who's read their HOA, CC, and Rs? I mean, very few of us, let's face it.
I tried, put you to sleep.
So, and you hate to think about it, but those are legal obligations
Sure.
that everybody buys into when you buy that lot. So it's a caution.
I've got investors who say, Ken, will not buy anything in an HOA.
Yeah.
Forget it. Don't even show it to me.
And really in Brentwood, it's very rare you're going to find a neighborhood that doesn't, because most of our plans are going to have some type of open space that is going to fall to somebody to maintain, and we're going to make that be an HOA, or you're going to have a detention pond that we don't allow to be on private lots, so that's going to be an open space. So this is going to be very rare in Brentwood, other than maybe a 2 or 3 lot subdivision with their own driveways out to the road or something, where there's not going to be an HOA going forward.
The concern though is in the older neighborhoods, those HOAs are voluntary.
Right, there's no
River
legal.
Oaks, Fountainhead, Meadow Lake, Rondelay, Twin Springs, and that's where so many of the teardowns are coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, so they don't have any architectural design review or anything like that.
No,
Right.
and we've got some that they're pushing the height restrictions, where the height restriction's 50 feet, and when you shoot it with a laser, it's 51 or 52.
And actually, I think ours is 54, but I'm not, you may be right, 50, yeah. And that's the other thing, it's some of that stuff, I should never say this. We have things, slope of driveway requirements and height requirements and all that. And so there's a plan submitted to us that complies with all that, and we agree and sign it, and we issue a building permit or a grading permit or whatever. And then you get 80% into a build, and all of a sudden something's out of compliance. And it's always the ask forgiveness type of thing. And then let's face it, you've got 3 parties there. You got the builder who wants to finish the project, get his or her money and be gone. You got the future homeowner who maybe says, I'm fine with it the way it is. I just want to move in. But then you got the next homeowner and the next one after that who maybe doesn't, and comes back to us 5 or 7 years from now and says, why did y'all approve this? Or, that kind of stuff. So we're constantly put in the middle of being the bad guy, but it's pretty hard for us to tell somebody to tear their house down when it's 80% done for a foot.
Well,
And I don't have an answer to that. It's frustrating.
Whose responsibility is it to go out on the job site though and make sure that that framing is within the requirements? So if something was framed and it's 52 and not 50, who responds to that? Because it's creeping, now it's 52, the next time it's gonna be 54, the next time it's gonna be 56, because they see what's happening in these older neighborhoods.
Yeah, and honestly, our guys are out there code type stuff, so they're not out there enough to probably catch it every time. Ultimately, it's the builder's responsibility. They're the one that signed the plan. I've got 5 building inspectors in the city of Brentwood. So, they're visiting a job when the contractor says I need to, or, I'm ready for this inspection or that inspection. We don't have the resources to babysit every job every other day. And again, ultimately, if we become the bad guy, we just say, okay, tear it down. Now height things, they can play games with that because you can just grade the lot a foot higher on the foundation and measure from there because it's the lowest grade. And again, there's a variety of things can be done on that. But it's a challenge.
I'm the president of an HOA, of a voluntary HOA in Old Brentwood. And I get calls per week about the construction in the neighborhood and are they within the requirements? So as president, do I call codes and say, can you come out and shoot the elevations, or what do we do? Or do we just say to the homeowner, you need to call the builder with your concern?
They can call the city. Now, we may put it on the builder to go shoot the grade and give us a reading of that kind of stuff. But no, you should always call the city. Now, whether or not we end up being the one or whether we follow up with the developer, but is it mainly height or is it all others?
It's mainly height.
Yeah, because if it's, are they over the setback or, that kind of stuff, or are they on my property, those kind of things. We're going to push back to the builder to say, okay, did you stake the property line and prove to us where you're at? Does it happen? It happens fairly often, yeah. But ultimately, they give us a set of building plans, and so the question is how strictly do we hold them to a plan once it's almost done? And there have been times where we force people to tear down a garage and reset from a finished floor elevation and that kind of stuff. But we never want to be in that position because we're the bad person. Even though we didn't make the mistake, somebody else did. You got the moving van parked in front and all of a sudden you say, well, you can't move in because, the grade of this lot isn't right or wrong. Well, they start calling and, we're the bad person and it's a no-win situation. But it's happening more and more.
What's the single biggest challenge Brentwood's facing in the next 2 years?
The next 2 years, our biggest challenge is always managing growth. And if you think about it, our growth levels is nothing compared to everybody else around us. But so I think it's growth in general, but I think it's the tear down rebuild issue and the integrity of the older neighborhoods. And the fact that those were all built prior to any type of drainage standards. Many of them were built in the county and before the city was even founded. So you've got infrastructure issues there that probably get compounded by the redevelopment activity. We've got, I don't know, I won't ask which one you're in, but if you name them all, the River Oaks, Meadow Lake, Carondelet, they would all love to have sidewalks and everything else that all the new neighborhoods do. And to do that, you've got to put in all underground drainage. You're talking millions and millions of dollars. And so it's meeting the expectations in those older neighborhoods, either the existing residents or the new ones moving in, who see the Witherspoons and the east side of town, where you've got trails that you can get on and go for miles, and they feel like they're landlocked. And so how do we address those expectations, which is difficult to do on the west side of town. There's very limited ability. So I think it's managing growth and the expectations of the new residents and what they think in terms of city services. We get a lot of questions about why don't we provide garbage service? Because most people come here from communities that do. And I have a good answer for people, but it's more and more we get those.
They don't want that answer.
How do you answer it?
Huh?
What's your answer?
So a couple of different answers is, one, philosophically, what started is way back when is, that as a government, we should do what private sector can. So garbage service is provided by the private sector. You pick your vendor. Now, they're getting fewer and fewer and more and less reliable, to be honest with you, but the private sector can do it, so why should the city step in? If we do it, it's going to be universal. It's not going to be free. So everybody's going to pay a little bit on their water bill or something every month for it. So there's a lot of people in town who are happy taking it to their convenience center. So those people are going to have to start paying for it, whether they wanted it or not. We're going to pick one vendor who's going to miss routes, who's going to miss homes, just like the private people do. So the idea that government will step in and fix it and it'll be a nirvana in terms of the way the service is provided is just not reality. And then for us, once we provide that service and we collect the waste, whether we do it ourselves or whether we do it with a private vendor, we own that waste in the landfill forever in terms of environmental liability and those kind of things. So as long as the private sector is a viable alternative and that allows people to choose whether they want to do it or not, that's the way we'll go. Now, if the private sector just fell apart and there were no providers, that'd be a different story. I think we might have to step in, but that's always our route, is that as long as the private sector can do it, we should let them do it. Because it's not like, I don't know, whatever I pay, $17 a month or whatever it is, for garbage. I mean, it's not like we're going to do it for $2 a month. I mean, everybody's going to pay whether you use it or not. And a lot of people won't like that. Or everybody, the people that like Joe, their vendor, and Joe's been with them for years. And we're going to pick the big corporate one, and all of a sudden, so it's just, there'll be more dissatisfaction, I think, than there would be satisfaction with it.
Question in the chat. Two questions actually. Could you touch on any road changes or expansions, and also the McEwen extension and time frame? Where will that extension finally connect to? The present map does not depict the total future plans.
Okay. Just road plans in general. Our next big road, other than, I'm surprised nobody's asking when Franklin Road's going to be done.
Seriously.
Maybe
we're all just assuming not. Never.
But, my disclaimer is Franklin Road is a TDOT contracted project. Not the city of
I thought you were going to say COVID.
No, realistically, that about a year from now, that should be done. It'll be substantially done probably 6 or 8 months from now. And if you've been down there, you see a lot of new pavement so they'll start seeing lane changes and all that kind of stuff. The next big city project, we just finished Sunset Road out along Governor's Club there from Ragsdale. So our next big one will be Ragsdale, back from Glen Ellen back to the Split Log 3-way stop there, which is kind of this way now. So that kind of completes that Sunset Ragsdale Split Log loop of things. And that'll start design work this year, but it probably won't start construction until 2023. And then after that, probably Sunset out to Waller Road, where we meet Nolensville there. West side of town, we're looking at doing a roundabout at Holly Tree Gap and Murray Lane, which is a 3-way stop out there now, which has pre-COVID had some backups, certainly during school hours and during the evening rush. And so we really like the roundabouts. We've done there on Crockett at a couple spots. Some people don't like them, I understand that, but from a traffic management flow standpoint, they work great. And so that's a good spot there. So that one hopefully will be spring of 22 starting construction out there. McEwen, anybody, you've got people in Traditions, Morgan Farms, Terramore. McEwen connects to all of those at the back end of it. And if you ever drive out to the back ends of there's stub streets that nobody can say they didn't know they were there. But that's a joint project between us and Franklin. Technically, it's in Franklin's boundaries. It's a long, sordid story, but it's technically in Franklin's boundaries. The northern edge of it is Brentwood, those 3 subdivisions. It was part of a land boundary adjustment we did 15 or so years ago. And so we're contributing really almost 60% of the funding. There was some preliminary design work done. We're kind of redoing that because it's been so long. So construction starting there at the earliest would be 23 or 24 probably. There's the major gas line that runs out in that area, if you've seen that.
Where does it go from Wilson Pike?
It'll go Wilson Pike, kind of over to Pleasant Hill, and then Pleasant Hill, kind of follow the Pleasant Hill route out to Clovercroft. Now, the section we're doing just really takes it through Terramore and stops there. Because beyond that, you're in the county right now until we annex and development happens. Now, longer term, there was still talk of what used to be the Sam Ridley extension, a connection all the way over, taking that road, whatever name it might have as you go further east, through Nolensville over to Smyrna and I-24, and kind of make an I-24 to I-65 connection through that route. But the immediate project will be just from Wilson Pike through Terramore. So connecting those three neighborhoods here. Breezeway on the Franklin side will connect into that too. But beyond that, there's an old Vernon Road that takes to Pleasant Hill, and then kind of following Pleasant Hill out to Clovercroft, kind of along that routing. And at that point, you leave the Brentwood urban growth boundary. So beyond that, it's Nolensville, Franklin, Williamson County, then into Smyrna, if it continues on, which is a challenge because most of that land's getting bought up and developed. So they're trying to establish that corridor to try to help preserve it going forward, even though it may be decades before it's built. So hopefully that answers that one. But all three of those neighborhoods have stub roads that go right into it. They were all planned based upon that alignment. So as we know, when people realize that that's what's going to happen, that some people are going to say, well, stop it or whatever.
Stop it.
We're paying 60% of a road. We're going to make sure our neighborhoods actually have access to
Sure.
it. Sorry.
Questions about schools. Are there any plans regarding current schools? And I think one of the questions was, are there any new schools planned to be built?
So Jordan Middle, which will be behind Jordan Elementary, that would be the next one
Sure.
in Brentwood in terms of new schools. And I think that's on their plan for the next couple of years. The bigger one will be their plan to basically rebuild a Brentwood Middle School.
Oh, wow.
Which will be a phase, maybe you got more details, I don't know, but a phased approach where they build some, tear some down, build some more, tear some more. But essentially they will rebuild Brentwood Middle in place is their plan. And that's really scheduled really in the next few years also. Now, whether that's all subject to county funding. There's an addition being added to Ravenwood High School right now that's been approved. That's starting this summer, I think. That'll be open in fall of 22. That adds, I don't know how many classrooms, but it takes their capacity up to, I think, over 2,000 students.
So Jordan Middle's going to be a new school?
It'll be a new school directly behind Jordan Elementary. That property was built and planned always for those two schools to be there. They just built the elementary first. Then there's talk, of maybe other schools like in Nolensville, whatever, that might have some residual effects in Brentwood. But for right now, I think those are the two ones that are on their plan in the next 5-year plan. Well, those three count the addition at Ravenwood.
Sure.
Are we going to have any more blue ribbon schools other than Liscombe Elementary next year?
Schools are not the thing I want to be involved in.
Sorry.
I'll deal with my neighbor's house is 2 feet higher than it should be versus critical race theory or whatever else might be going on.
Right.
Kurt, as Brentwood grows, as our population grows, what are the plans to continue to grow the police department and the fire department? Is there a population metric that applies to the budget?
Not directly as far as a population metric. There are some national standards. FBI has standards of so many officers per 1,000, but that really doesn't take into account the type of community you are in terms of crime rate and all that kind of stuff. So again, the headquarters is a big step in that, and so we'll continue to add officers as we go along. Fire Station 5, which is going to be out on Split Log Road, right there by the three-way I used to say three-way stop, but now it's a stoplight, three-way intersection. When I started with the city, Mike, we were just opening Station 4 on Sunset Road. And Mike Walker said that's the last one we'll ever need. So Station 5 is out there. So it's a gradual thing. Luckily, thankfully, knock on wood, whatever that is. Crime rates and all that stuff still it's a very safe community. So we just need to incrementally add, but we don't use national standards simply because they don't take into account really the type of community and the activity levels we have.
Are they maintaining a substation at City Hall?
There will be a if you come into City Hall to your right, there's a place where you can pick up the phone and be connected to a dispatcher. So that will remain. And they would send an officer up there to take a report or whatever. So we'll have a room for them to meet with people, but there won't be a permanent staffing presence there.
Is that not a concern with Maryland Farms being such a high density area? And then the closest service for the west side will be the Sunset
In terms of the
police coverage.
Well, yeah, again, our police officers are out and about. They're not physically, during the day at the station, you've got the administrative staff or whatever, but your patrol people are all out and about and in their zones anyway. So that won't change.
That won't change.
Yeah. Yeah, we had questions about, and we just don't, right now, if we have officers, we want them on the street, not sitting in a room at City Hall, maybe waiting for something. But, you bring up a valid point. As far as just activity levels in City Hall, but City Hall is pretty well locked down now. We did that post-COVID. You can get into the lobby, but you can't get many other places. So, we'll look at that. But as far as patrol presence on the street, that won't change with the move to the new building.
When you say fire station number 5 is going to start
Start this fall,
this fall?
and hopefully be open by late summer or fall of next year.
Is that the corner of Edmondson and Split Lawn?
Ragsdale and Split Log.
Right.
Where if you're coming up from Wilson Pike, you come to the three-way, you turn right to continue on Split Log to go out by Jordan. There's a little white house that sits there that we bought a couple of years ago.
They've been doing training in that old house?
They've done some, yeah. They'll eventually burn it down here in the next few months.
Nice.
They've been swatting it like.
Yeah, the SWAT has been using it and that kind of stuff too.
Is Jeff Hughes still the chief?
Jeff's the chief. Jeff will be retiring next year.
Oh,
He,
Good for him.
he wanted to get the building built. We call it the
Yeah.
Hughes Mahal. It's like what we call it. We're having a bunch of HVAC issues in it, new construction or whatever. So when he calls me and tells me it's 78 degrees in his office, I said, well, it's 70 in my office at City Hall. You shouldn't have left. So, but yeah, he's chief.
you better watch it.
Richard Hickey is our assistant chief, and if all goes according to plan, Richard would be promoted to chief.
Who?
Richard Hickey,
Richard Hickey.
who's been with the department 30 plus years also. So, but yeah, so police wise, that's a concern. But again, we're lucky in that the community that we are. Our biggest challenge is, I get the weekly little crime report of things that I'm able to see. They don't necessarily share everything with me, but you're still amazed at the number of vehicle break-ins, and off to the side it says unlocked, unlocked, unlocked.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
With valuable.
Or cars stolen, keys were in.
Keys in. Has there been an increase since COVID or not really?
It's actually been a little bit of a decrease, although we expected, because more people were in our parks, we expected that to be and that's our big place of break-ins is in parks and the Ys and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the numbers are dramatically up. Shoplifting and that kind of stuff, maybe. But the challenge is, we have people who come here because we're a target-rich environment for that kind of stuff. And then we make it easy for them by leaving vehicles unlocked and keys in the cars and guns in the cars.
That's terrifying.
And garage door openers who easily get into your garage and your
wow.
gun safe. We had I don't know all the details, but somebody who just got into an unlocked car, used the garage door opener, got in the garage, and there was the person's unlocked gun safe. 20-some
Oh,
guns.
Lord.
So, some of it's, you can't fix that.
Can't legislate stupid. That's just stupid.
Other than Rosebrook, is there any other subdivision plan for Split Log?
So there is, so Rosebrook is the one that's been fully approved and has a plan approved. Turnberry is going through the process on another one just east of where Split Log hits Sunset Road, and a little bit south of Waller. Split Log kind of does an S in there. So Turnberry has some property. Part of it's in Nolensville and part of it is in our urban growth boundary that we're in the midst of annexing. So it's not approved yet. And I think that's 20, I don't remember how many lots, 28, 26. But again, part of it will also be in Nolensville, an additional 40 or 50 lots. Otherwise, there's a lot of interest in property out there. I had an email from a developer who says they got a contract on another piece right next to Rosebrook. There's some property just past Jordan Elementary that's in the county that is inquired about getting annexed.
But that's 5 acre minimum, right?
No, the county zoning now in the urban growth areas of the cities is still their 1 acre density.
Urban, right?
Yeah. Everything else is the 5 acres.
It's still 1 acre.
Still 1 acre, yeah. So the other one out there on Split Log past Jordan, that's one where we control the utilities. So the commission will vote, not tonight, but 2 weeks from tonight, whether to even move forward with considering that. Now, the other one, the Turnberry one, is in that area where it's Metro Sewer and Nolensville water, so they can develop with or without being in the city, so we'll pursue that one, I think. And then the Allen property, which is the one across from Terramore. That's getting close to probably having lots available here sometime later this year.
What'd you call that, the what property?
Well, we call it the Allen property because that's who owned it.
Allen's Green,
Allen's Green, is that what they're calling it? Yeah.
they're selling in there now.
Are they? 28 lots, something like that,
I thought it was
27?
Less than that, but it
Yeah.
may be.
You know, certainly interest is picked back up all over.
Is Terramore built out?
I believe so, the final last.
They got that
section.
last section where you go down the big hill and back up.
Yeah.
There may be still a few lots in there, I don't
Yeah,
know.
they're pretty much done.
If I was one of the original people, I think that'd be a little irritable. I think that those last few houses that have been building don't look as good as them.
Or they got good prices.
Oh,
yeah.
they got that.
What do you think about Terramore started what, probably 2003, 2004 or so
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
now I'm drawing a blank on what.
John Whelan.
John Whelan. homes,
John
yeah.
Whelan.
Yeah, and then it,
Yeah,
you know,
Dave
sat,
Donnie put that deal together.
sat dormant there through, you know, when the bust hit and then Pulte came in and. you know,
Bought them out, yeah.
You mentioned working with City of Franklin, Williamson County, Nolensville. Do you do any sort of collaboration on anything with Metro?
Not much. And I don't know if the people, the question was whether we collaborate much on Metro. We do share along our border. If there's a development plan, we'll share it. Just for knowledge, to be quite honest with you, we don't really have any defined kind of interlocal agreements about things like we do with some of the others. I will say that the couple council members who kind of border us there, Ms. Henderson and Robert Swope, they're good at kind of giving us a heads up on things and at least taking some input from us, but there's no formal process, no formal agreement on things. Because they got some things going on out on Church Street there, kind of across from Annandale and out there. Now, we'll work with them on some road things. And somebody asked about traffic, or you were going to, I can't remember what we were going to do. About traffic, you know, in Maryland Farms and that north, I mean, there's not, unless we're going to start buying down or tearing down homes in neighborhoods to move roads, there's really not much we can do in terms of road. Now, long term is what's the future of the Old Hickory Boulevard, I-65, Franklin Road, kind of whole interchange area, which is all in Metro and all state highways. So we do have some ongoing collaboration with them about long-term stuff, but I mean, it's nothing imminent.
Would there ever be a possibility of a small amount located on commercial property of a few short-term rentals in Brentwood?
Well, technically, yeah. I mean, our ban on short-term rentals is only in the residential zoning districts. So,
Interesting.
in theory, Tapestry is zoned commercial. So our
Well, it's
provisions.
Metro pass, it's gotta be commercial.
Yeah, so our provisions would not, now we would not allow new residential structures developed on commercial property, but that's not allowed use. But Tapestry would be one where that could have short-term rentals in it. Now, I think their own covenants prohibit it,
Right.
but our prohibition on short-term rentals is all related into our residential zoning code, not commercial.
So,
Are homes in Brentwood allowed to be subdivided and rented to separate?
Not subdivided in terms of like completely separate living areas walled off. No,
Like a basement, again, I live in an older Brentwood neighborhood. We have discovered that we've got a couple of people that are renting their basement to a non-related family member. And it's separate, it's not the all.
yeah, to do it, you're supposed to have all shared access to living
Right.
space, right?
Where in the codes do I find that it doesn't allow that? Because I've read those codes over and over again. It just tells me that if you're going to rent the house, it has to be a connected family member, no further than a first cousin, and they have to have full run of the home.
No, well, that's where it would be. I mean, that section, that definition of single family
that's
housing.
it.
Okay, but it doesn't say, the pushback we're getting is that nowhere in the codes does it say, I can't do that. And we say, this is the definition of.
Well, this is the definition of single family housing, and so to be in that zoning district, you've got to comply with
abide by
that
that rule.
definition.
Okay.
If you don't meet that
Share that
definition,
again.
yeah. So yeah, so you can rent in Brentwood, and you can rent to non-related people, but only one non-related person and any of their extended family. So it doesn't have to be a family. You can have two unrelated people living in the same home, but it's got to be a shared,
Full access. to
yeah.
the-
You can't say, well, you only have this space and here's your kitchen
Right.
and there's your separate door. It's got to be a full shared kind of living arrangement.
Is there a possibility of, commercial, live, work, or work, live, ever being built anywhere commercially in Brentwood?
No, because again, we don't allow the tapestry. So there's one building there at the old Gold Rush at Franklin Road and Town Center Way.
Gold Rush?
Used to be an old Gold Rush store where you could
Sell your
turn in
gold
your
stuff.
jewelry
That
and all
teeny little
that.
booth?
Yeah, so it's now gone. There's a building on there now, it's completely empty, that's got commercial space below and two apartments above it. That was the last building approved under the zoning that allowed for that arrangement. Now the residential component of that is no longer in the zoning code, so you couldn't have
Okay,
residential on top of commercial.
but you could theoretically do commercial dirt with a commercial building with short-term rental units? No.
No, you couldn't, because a residential living area in a commercial zoning is not allowed,
Oh,
so.
okay.
Was someone thought that there might have been an overlay in the town center development?
There used to be for residential, but that got, once the
That was it.
tapestry was approved, Streets of Brentwood that included it, didn't get approved. And so then they took out the whole residential allowance within the town center zoning
So unless they change the HOA, which would be very difficult,
at tapestry.
tapestry, there's no
Right.
short-term rental. in Brentwood.
Now, I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, they're happening around because it's hard to find unless we get a complaint. Now we'll go search all the Airbnbs and their websites to try to find them,
Sure.
but you know, they don't give you the exact address now. So if they got good pictures that show the exterior of the house, then we can find it.
Well, I mean, I
But some
guess
of them are
there's-
getting good about not giving you too much to be able to identify them. That's the only way, unless we get complaints.
I guess there's a few people that are just, live there, owner occupant, and they're just renting out a bedroom or something.
Which is, yeah, it's hard for us to find unless
Yeah.
it's, but it's happening. I can't say it isn't.
To piggyback on that, can you address what happened in Hillview Estates with that home?
Hillview Estates.
The house that was sold and advertised as a.
Oh, out there on, off of Manly.
Yeah, no, off of Johnson's Chapel Extension. Williamson Estates, I'm sorry, Williamson Estates.
So I'm thinking of the one that you go off Manly, it's behind,
It was the one where the gentleman bought it and then very
Was gonna
quickly
subdivide
advertised it, subdivide it for 5 or 6
Yeah,
bedrooms.
yeah.
What happened with that? Was the city able to?
yeah,
shut that down?
so this is a house, it's a pretty large house, and I've never been inside of it, but, out there in an older section, behind Hillview or.
Okay, it was,
Yeah.
all right.
Off of Manly and what, anyway, so it bought it and was advertising it on Craigslist right after he bought it, for like 10 people, it's gonna be subdivided into 10 bedrooms and weed friendly, I think was on one of the ads and all kinds of stuff.
That's marketing right there.
Yeah, so the neighborhood went crazy, which you can understand.
Medical weed.
So we got a hold of him, met with him and said, listen, here's the code, here's what you can do. One unrelated person. Now he had a disability, a certified medical through the military. So that gives him an allowance for some caretakers, you know, whether you question it or not, that's just the way it is. So we told him what he could do and the limits of it. And then the neighbors were just watching him like a hawk. So we would get calls every time about, hey, there's a red car there today. It wasn't there yesterday. I mean, it was just, so we had to try to walk them off the ledge a little bit and just try to understand that, hey, you know, he has certain rights to do things. He can renovate the home. You know, if someone stays, there for a few nights and he says they're working on the home, I mean, we're not going to run tags and track people down.
Background checks.
But it was a lot of back and forth. We eventually did document that he had more than the allowed number of non-related people there. So we wrote him a ticket and got him in the city court. And for the most part, he has complied. It's on the market to be sold now. I don't know if it has. It may be the only house in Brentwood that didn't sell. So for the most part, we think we addressed it as best we can. But people think we can just go knock on a door and force our way in and start interrogating people and who are you and how are you related? I mean, we can't do that. So they would get frustrated with us that, you know, we would say, well, here's what he's told us. Well, we know that's not true because we've seen this car and that car. And it's just for us to kind of go in someone's private property and start questioning who's living there and why. And, you know, it's just something we've got to be very deliberate about. So the neighbors were frustrated with us for a while about not just swooping in there and, you know, with a truck and pulling people out and taking them away or something. But I think ultimately I'm happy with the way it turned out. The neighbors may think we drag our foot and it took forever, but ultimately he didn't do what he was advertising to do. When we could prove something, we took him to court. That got his attention, and he's now trying to sell it. Hopefully he will, and that'll be the end of it.
Has the city seen an influx of home-based business license applications during COVID?
If we have, I haven't heard about it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And that's one.
What's the requirement?
Well, that's
for that.
See, you know, when that's one of our code is probably a little bit outdated. Because I think our code was put in place when, even before COVID, when people just, salesmen working from, you know, I mean, they got a computer and so, but our limits basically are, if you operate your business or working out of your home, you're supposed to, I think it's like a $10 a year permit. But so the things we limit though are things like you can't have customers coming. You can't complete transactions in your homes. Now for like the tutors or, you know, piano teachers, you know, we allow one kind of student customer at a time. But beyond that, I mean, today's age, I mean, there's no way you could ever say who's, I mean, my wife is an independent contractor, accountant person. I mean, she works from home, so I make her get her permit, but no one would ever know. She never has anybody come, you know, so there's a lot going on that probably people don't even think about that I'm operating a business. You're just working for somebody and that's your workplace. But we do limit things like, you know, and daycare type operations are limited to the whatever number doesn't have to be licensed by the state. But otherwise it's, you know, tutors, one customer at a time, that kind of stuff are the limits. So I don't know if the people that were working from home because of COVID, my guess is most of them never came and got a permit. Because in their minds, they're really working for somebody else. That's just their location for more. I think what else? Any other? Paula Cerulli's got to have a question. Come on, Paula.
She's been asking questions. She asked about the overlay in town center.
All right. Trying to think what else is going on.
I have been asking, and I do like the roundabouts as much as I complained about them before. I really do like them. I think they really keep traffic moving. I was worried about the McEwen extension on Morgan Farms. I had a client who lived there. There is, by the way, a terrible drainage issue right next to that last house in Morgan Farms. And I have actually talked to Jeff about it, and nothing has been done. My clients left, so it's not personal to me anymore, but it was. And I think it's probably personal to the people who are living there at this time. It's really a bug catcher, so to speak. So
it's just a sitting water somewhere, I assume?
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I know. It's just a comment. You don't have to say or do anything
If it's
about
on private property, that becomes more of a codes nuisance thing versus
it. It's not private property. That space is, I think they were holding off doing anything because they're going to expand. That road's going to be open to Breezeway and McEwen. So, but it is an issue if it ever comes up again.
Okay.
I think you're doing a good job, by the way.
Why haven't we had you here before, Kurt?
I haven't been asked. Again, I have been doing some stuff with Parks Group, but I'm always happy to. Again, we don't have as much going on as Franklin and Spring Hill, even Owensville these
This
days.
is where we live, so we're interested.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Is this more personal or
Yeah.
professional for you?
Both. I
Good
mentioned it
stuff.
to a couple of people. They're like, "Can I go?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, other long-term, I'm trying to think of road stuff. People always ask about Wilson Pike north of Concord, kind of Wilson up to Church where it's, and again, that's a state route. They are going to be repaving that this year, if you're questioned about paving of that, condition of paving. But, at this point, we think the state's going to have to take that on, and there's no interest in it. It wasn't on their list of Improve Act projects, which they've still got, dozens and dozens of those to do. So I don't see anything happening on Wilson Pike anytime soon.
As far as widening,
Widening.
fixing the shoulders and the drop offs.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, maybe we step in and pick a few bad spots where it's truly just, 3 feet down, off the shoulder. The problem with widening Wilson Pike is, I mean, you're putting curbs and gutters 25 feet in people's front door.
Yeah.
And people forget whenever we widen a road, well, what comes outside of that road? Well, then all those utility poles.
Yeah.
So if we come 15 feet on your property, then another 10 feet behind that is the utility poles, and they're going to scalp every tree down the road. So the impacts would be dramatic.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason nobody really wants to take that on. But at some point in time, something will have to happen there.
Did Brentwood get any PPP Hayden-Harris money?
So we got, it's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. So, the different, all the pots of monies, we didn't qualify for the PPE stuff, but there was some of the money that was the original Relief Act went to the state. And so we got about $600,000. That was our share that we used to just offset public safety salaries during the COVID times. Now the newest relief pot of money that passed in March, we're going to get about $12 million.
Wow.
Wow.
And quite honestly, we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And that sounds terrible. I know it does, but
Your tax dollars are.
but if you look at what they allow us to do, they would allow us to hand it out to affected workers. I guess restaurant workers and hotel workers maybe or whatever, and that kind of, they don't live in Brentwood. Again, it sounds terrible to say that. So us passing it through to the private sector, we don't have a system in place to do that and monitor and audit it and all that. So we don't see that being viable. It says you can use it to offset lost revenue that was due to COVID. So we're looking at our financials and see, but in all honesty, our revenues were not down much. So depending on how they say which revenues you calculate, we may be able to use a little bit of that to offset. And then
So if you can't just rationalize or justify it, you got to send it back.
yeah, so the catch-all that we'll end up using if we have to is it allows for water sewer projects. So we've got a sewer tank project. We've got a whole replacing all the water lines in Carondelet in the next few years.
Or maybe something with the schools.
Yeah, no, we can't. Schools are getting their own money. They're getting their own money.
Public safety?
Huh?
Fire station? Could you not use
No.
any of it? None?
No. 'No.
'Cause, That's Washington.
Water lines are huge, though, Scott.
Yeah.
Need it.
So that's ultimately where we go. The little bit of a political problem is, I mean, let's philosophically, politically, how you want to say it. Probably people say Brentwood, we didn't need it, and politically, maybe we shouldn't have ever been done. But if we're going to get it, I mean, I don't want to send it back to Washington because it'll get spent in Illinois or New York or somewhere else. So, I mean, but for us, if we do it on water sewer, it doesn't benefit the entire community because part of our city isn't on our water system and part of our city isn't in our sewer system. So ideally, you'd like to do something that you can point to that everybody benefits. And I would argue if it's sewer related and it prevents sewer overflows, whether you're on our sewer system or not, environmentally, the community benefits. So, but that's what we're trying to figure out. So we're trying to get some guidance from the comptroller. You'll love the federal government nomenclature. They sent us a 150-page interim final rule that we're supposed to try to understand. Waiting for final rule, I guess. But again, is pretty limited in terms of, because we didn't really have that great of a COVID impact as an organization and as a community. I mean, our revenues are stronger than ever. Online sales tax is a big deal these days. Until a few years ago, if you bought something online and had it delivered to your house in Brentwood, that money just went to a big pot of money at the state and we would get a share of it. Well, now it gets directly credited to Brentwood for local sales tax. So during the pandemic, you saw that skyrocket. And then all our grocery stores and Costco, of course, were big. Hotels are down, restaurants are still down. But I mean, in any given month, Amazon.com is one of our top 10 local sales tax things. BestBuy.com, all that. So what I tell people is, if you shop in Target, if you go to Target here and buy something, then the sales tax goes to Franklin. If you go to Target.com and buy something and it gets delivered to your house in Brentwood, then the sales tax comes to us. Yeah. And I'm not trying to, but I'm just saying that's the dynamics of how things work. Even though the
Target's in Brentwood?
That Target's in Franklin.
Oh.
That side of the road is in Franklin. Aldi is in Brentwood. Yeah. It's crazy.
It gerrymanders, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much additional sales tax revenue will the city realize from this switch from the education impact fee going to the school system versus going to the city of Brentwood?
Yeah. So the question there is that, the sales tax increase, half-cent increase happened April of 2018 is when it went into effect. So and we all the cities in Williams County agreed to give up our share of that for 3 years. And it all went to the schools at the county level. So that 3-year period is now over. Actually, the end of this week, we'll get our first report from the state for the month of April sales that will have all that money coming to us. But if you look at what we've been collecting and what that half-cent would have been, it's probably about $4 to $4.2 million, which we'll put all to capital, because that's the problem. I mean, cost of construction of homes is going up dramatically. Well, so is the cost of fire stations, roads, you name it.
Should it approximately be?
About a little over $4 million right now is our share. If you took our last year's or our current year's collections and had we had that half-cent the whole year, it would have been about $4.2 million. For Franklin, it's probably 8 to 10 million or so, probably for them.
Did they ask y'all to give it back to the schools?
They did not. And that's what, we had a pretty good conversation with Rogers Anderson and the folks then is, okay, we agree to do this. Don't come back and put us in the bad spot. I mean, because the reality is, while it's $4.2 million, this is the last year that we're getting hall income tax. The hall income tax, we got a share of that for people who lived in Brentwood. And the average that we had gotten for that over the last 10 years is about $3.5 million. So we're losing. So, you say, well, the city's just getting $4.5 million new. Well, we're losing 3.5. So the net, it's a gain, but it's not all of that gain from the sales tax increase, because we've been having to, and we've been slowly drawing down what we budget for the hall tax. So we're planning for it. But it's really more of an offset plus a little bit than just all new money.
I think we got one last question, and I think we'll wrap it up because you've been with us for quite a while. New home build, does the impact fee go solely to the school system?
Which impact fee? Because there's multiple ones.
When you pull a permit to build a new home, I think.
Yeah, right, but I'm saying that there's build a permit for a new home. We have a road impact fee that's about $5,300, $5,200. That comes to Brentwood and is solely for road capacity improvements or our widening projects, those kind of things. The county has the school impact fee one, which, I don't know, tens of thousands.
It's about 12 to 15 for
Yeah,
housing.
that goes all to the county, dedicated to school capital. If you're in our water or sewer area, you're gonna have, we don't call it an impact fee, but you're gonna have a TAP fee,
Right.
which is $5,000 for each. And that's kind of your buy-in to the capacity of the system.
If you're in septic, do you pay that?
No, you would if you had water, but not sewer.
But if the sewer's available.
Sewer's available, if sewer's available, you don't connect, you won't pay it, but you're gonna still get a sewer bill. A monthly sewer bill because sewer's available.
I thought if sewer's available, you have to.
Well, yeah, technically, yeah, the county wouldn't permit
You can't put a septic in, you
Yeah.
have to.
Or the lender would require you to put the
No, you're just forced to by the county.
the county would never approve a septic, but we have some places where we've extended sewer and people had functioning septic systems and they chose not to connect. So then we still send them a monthly sewer bill.
A minimum bill.
A minimum bill, yeah.
What's the tap sewer fee?
Water sewer for us is $5,000 each, so $10,000 if you're on both. And that goes to our utility district or our utility system. But then on top of that, you've got an adequate facilities tax that the county is so many dollars per square foot, $1 a square foot maybe.
It's $1.
Yeah.
Two of those.
Yeah, and there's a couple, and I don't understand them all because there's more than one, but that all goes to the county. But we do get a portion of that back, the school adequate facilities tax, which is separate from the school impact fee.
Lord.
So a small portion of that goes back to each city with a capital plan. We have to put it to capital.
How much is that? School adequate facilities fee?
I don't know. I think the school or the county adequate facilities maybe $1 a square foot, and the school one maybe a little more. I don't know.
They're both
Are
$1.
they both $1?
You have the two $1 a square foot added facilities taxes, and then you have the education impact fee that is a tiered approach based on square
size,
footage.
yeah.
But for a house in Brentwood, it's typically gonna be 12 to 15 and 15, I think.
We have a form we have to disclose to buyers that buy new construction that tells them the builders passed a statute.
And the builders sued the county and that went on
Yeah.
for a while, but lost, and the county has won that. So all that goes to the county. So the only thing we get is our road impact fee and water sewer if you're in our district. And then we get a little bit back from the county on the school one. And I think that's it. Now Franklin, I know, has like a park fee, but I don't know if that's paid by the builders or whether it's by the developers and a few others. Nolensville, I think, has a few others. But yeah, I'm sure before you turn the first shovel of dirt, there's probably
$80,000.
between permitting fees and a lot of other things. Yeah. But those who are here would argue, well, you gotta pay for what you're getting when you come here. So schools are a challenge. And it's going to continue to be the biggest challenge. There's no question about it. I will say, even with all those impact fees, that most subdivisions don't pay for themselves in terms of city services on top of schools. When you throw capital into it, operating maybe.
Schools are what drive everybody moving.
Right.
So.
We just had the reappraisal and rates going down from 36 cents to 29 cents. Is going down, but they're actually technically raising their tax rate a little bit. Because when they have the reappraisal, they calculate a new effective tax rate so we don't gain just on the reappraisal. So the counties, I think they're going down and then back up a little bit. So the county technically is proposing, at least now, they haven't adopted it, proposing to raise taxes a little bit this year. We will not be.
So Brentwood's going from 36 to 29.
Yeah.
But it'll be kind of a wash because the appraisals
Right.
are.
Across the board.
Yeah.
For any individual property though, I think that number average for the city was like 24% increase. So for property went up more than 24 cents, even though, or 24%, even though we're dropping our tax rate, they're gonna pay more in city taxes. Other people will pay less across the board, it's equal.
How is 24% commensurate with 36 cents to 29 cents?
Well, you go from 36 to 29, which is 7 cents on the 30, I don't know, the other thing that's factored in is new construction doesn't count against their appraisal, so.
Mike, isn't there a maximum that the tax could go up anyway? Isn't there some kind of maximum that it can go up?
No, there's no cap on local property tax increases.
I mean, as when you have a higher appraisal or assessment, like that first year, isn't there a cap on how far it can, how high it can go?
No.
Metro is running into.
No, I mean, again, as a city, we have to drop our tax rate to the new rate, but for any individual property, if their appraisal increase was a lot greater than our average, then theirs would just go up the full amount. There's no cap on it.
No, I mean for you, why are you dropping your rate? Why do you have to drop your rate?
Well, because, yeah, now the state requires us that we cannot get extra revenue just because of a reappraisal value.
Right, that's kind of what I was referring to.
Right,
Okay.
so yeah, we have to drop it back to what's called the same effective rate. So for us, the state calculated that to be like 0.2918. Well, we just rounded to the lowest penny, round down, so we're going to 29 cents. Now we could go back up if we wanted to kind of capture that growth.
Right.
But technically you've got to lower it first and then vote to raise it so that you're not trying to hide a vote that ends up raising your taxes. I think Nolensville's doing it. Franklin is not. The county is going to kind of go down to the new rate and then vote to go back up some.
Is that vote public? Is that a public vote?
Yeah, it has to be at a public meeting, publicly noticed.
I think the county's going from $2.22 to $1.75, and then they're plussing it back up 13 cents.
Yeah, $1.93,
So
yeah.
$1.88
Or something like that, yeah. So their new effective rate is if that's 175, and then they're gonna vote on a rate that's at 188, so a little bit. That's what Metro, does from time to time. That's why, John Cooper's saying that the big rate increase he did last year is really being absorbed because their effective rate's coming down by that, whatever he did almost, but it's still there.
Isn't that funny how he jumped out there PR wise to take credit for they're not gonna raise them as much, but it was the state quashing him saying, no, you can't do that.
It's still going up.
And they've got their challenges there too.
All righty, well, if there are no more questions, I think we've gone over time a little bit, so.
I'll ask you.
Oh, yeah, perfect. I think we'll call it a wrap.
Great, I'm
on our
happy to do it
group
anytime. I
discussion
appreciate
here.
it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.